how'd you learn to relate to your depression and like your depressive thoughts and your anxious thoughts differently? I imagine those didn't go away right away.
Yeah, it didn't. Especially with my anxious thoughts, the one thing that really helped me was just not to look too far into the consequences, not to look too far into what's going to happen, the results, because the more that I really thought about that, the more perfectionistic that I became, or the more that I wanted to avoid those events, right? That one example that I think I gave in the other session was, even just riding my bike, even taking it out, that would just give me a whole like woof of anxiety. And just having this thought that people are all staring at me and looking at me. And, those are the types of thoughts that I would have. But once I just realized that, all you just need to do is maybe take your bike out and come back in and say that you did good. And, just give yourself a pat on the back instead of criticizing yourself for all these, what you perceive as like weaknesses, I guess, in a way. But this is an opportunity, even if it's just walking your bike, as ridiculous as that sounds. Uh, that was the first step, baby steps, and then now you know, I should be getting back into riding, but I still do love riding my bike.
Yeah, and I hear you say like even walking your bike became an opportunity. Can you talk more about how you internalize the idea that any kind of exposure or going towards your fear and anxiety in any kind of way became a source of opportunity for you?
Yeah, actually, this just happened yesterday, and I really, it's actually become sort of like a thing that I try to do on a daily basis where, just do one exposure in a sense, like a day. And so I went on Clubhouse and I just went on into a room. I knew nobody in there. I talked. I like try to make a question or try to make my point. I guess nobody really know how to answer to that. And, at that moment, I had this whoosh of like anxiety, like, oh my God, did I make myself feel like an idiot or like what's going on? And they did kind of answer it and responded to what I had to say, but I still kind of felt weird. Um, but after a while, it was just like, okay, I did it. I actually did this. And, I'm pretty sure I can do it again. And it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. So yeah, it just really, I don't know, it just kind of, I try just not to think too much about the consequences, especially when it comes to my schoolwork, right? So before it was just a lot of anxiety. And instead of just like focusing in the moment, focusing at the time of just like, kind of doing your work together and not thinking about the results, everything just kind of flowed a lot easier. Um, and yeah, so in those aspects, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you become process driven rather than outcome driven. So you
Mhm.
recognize that the process of doing exposure not only gives you practice in experiencing anxiety and thinking about anxiety as like a workout you weren't asking for, rather than something that's meaningful and important. It's just a physiological reaction to a perceived threat. But if you expose yourself on purpose to that over time, then you do start to get evidence that it's not as bad as it in some cases you get evidence that it's not as bad as you thought it would be, and then that's going to decrease your anxiety over time. In other cases you just learn that you can tolerate the uncertainty and the anxiety, and then that can also be a confidence booster. So I'm really happy to hear that you've internalized that and you go towards exposure on a regular basis. I'm also happy to hear about how you shifted out of perfectionism. So being outcome driven and really being preoccupied with the consequences or the results is really perfectionistic. Um, is there something that you did to help yourself stop thinking about the results and start thinking more about the process?
Uh, I I'm not really exactly sure when that happened, but it was definitely a gradual it was just a gradual moment. I think just generally speaking, when I have to reflect back on my mental health, it was more I really needed to take things moment by moment, because, I think for the most part of my life, for the majority part of my life, everything was about the outcome, right? Everything was about expectations. Everything was about trying to reach a certain point at the age that you're at. My family is pretty conservative. And so, about that aspect. And I just never really felt I had a chance, in a sense, to really kind of focus on my well being, or just focus on just my mental health, just because everything was about competition. Everything was about, success in life, and not really talking about, my success within my mental well being, I guess. Right. So, it did feel like I'm just glad that it happened, better late than never. Um, and, the more that I think about just going through the process rather than thinking about those outcomes that I just feel like I'm living a more fuller life. I mean, in this sense, that kind of changed my career direction too.